I don't want to sleep anymore. If I close my eyes, Mom will disappear forever." The heart-wrenching scream echoed through the $1 million mansion. The millionaire father collapsed into his chair, his hands trembling. The triplets, each with a different personality, each with their own fear, had turned the nights into hell for months. 17 nannies had already quit. The media branded them the 3 demon children who never sleep. But he knew, deep in those tear-soaked eyes, they were only fractured hearts. Then a woman walked in, carrying the light of night. What did she do that changed everything? The loud pounding echoed through the wide hallway, followed by a scream that tore apart the silence of what should have been a $1 million mansion. White walls shook, family portraits neatly framed began to tilt as if ready to fall. In one room, little Ethan used both of his tiny fists to pound relentlessly on the door, his hoarse cries like an alarm bell. In the next room, Chloe collapsed into her pillow, tears soaking the sheets, her cries for her mother so raw they pierced even the heavy silk curtains. And in the darkest corner of the hallway, Alex sat with knees drawn tight, back pressed to the wall, his wide eyes fixed on the ceiling's abyss, as if a monster might fall from above. It all happened at once, like a chaotic symphony of shattered souls. Every night, precisely at 11 o'clock, the Whitaker mansion turned into a battlefield, where even the glow of a crystal chandelier could not hide the darkness eating away at every room. Mark Whitaker, a self-made tech millionaire, hurried across the gleaming hardwood floors, the sound of his leather slippers striking the stairs with a chilling echo. By day, he was the portrait of success. Conferences called his name. Magazines printed photos of a CEO with a sharp smile and confident eyes. But when night fell, that armor crumbled. He was no longer the businessman with millions in his account, only a helpless father standing between 3 bedrooms, each one resisting sleep. He tried everything. Some nights he cradled Ethan, only for the boy to thrash and scream as if imprisoned. Other nights he sat for hours beside Chloe's bed, telling fairy tales, but every word only made her wail louder, demanding, "Mommy, where are you?" And then there was Alex, the quietest, yet the hardest. He did not scream, he did not cry, he only trembled in the shadows, as if opening his mouth would bring the world crashing down. That silence haunted Mark more than any scream, because it echoed the eternal silence of Sarah, his wife, in the white coffin on the day of her funeral. 17 nannies had quit within 6 months. Some left in tears, some fled in the middle of the night. Others scribbled short notes. "I'm sorry. I can't continue." The cruelest gave interviews to the press, saying, "No amount of money is worth trading my sanity. Those triplets are like demons disguised as angels." Mark silently followed the headlines spreading online. The boldest reading, "Whitaker's sleepless triplets." People gossiped, mocked, pitied, even sneered. Some investors hesitated to mention his name in meetings, as though his business acumen was tainted by his personal chaos. But Mark no longer had the strength to care about reputation. The only thing that consumed him each night were the dark circles under his children's eyes, their tiny hands clinging desperately to the sheets, the ragged sound of their breath in the dark. He could sign a $10 million contract with a handshake, yet he couldn't coax his triplets into 1 hour of peaceful sleep. That helplessness eroded him piece by piece. He blamed himself not only for losing Sarah, but for the way her death was tied to him. She had crashed while driving out to buy sleeping pills for her husband. The thought alone was like thousands of knives piercing his chest. He believed every cry from his children was an invisible accusation. "Dad, you took Mom away from us." On some nights, while Ethan pounded the door, Chloe sobbed endlessly, and Alex shook silently in the shadows. Mark stood frozen in the hallway. For an instant, he thought he heard Sarah's voice calling his name from the far room, gentle as it once had been. But when he rushed in, there was only the cold wall and an endless emptiness. He collapsed, his hands tangled in his hair. Mark had built $1 million empire from nothing, but now it all seemed meaningless. Because in the dark, no contract could buy his children 1 night of peace. And deep in his soul, he feared the truth. He might lose everything not to the market, but within his own home. Was there anyone with enough patience and understanding to step into the night with his family, or was this a battle Mark would be forced to fight alone until he broke? All right then, my dear viewers, if you're still here and finding this story compelling, drop a comment with the number 1 or write, "I'm still here to keep listening." Rain hammered down on the streets of Boston, droplets lashing against the window of a small apartment where Belinda Johnson sat hunched before an old laptop. The blue glow on her face made her look older than her 30 years. Beside her, stacks of nursing night shift files and coffee-stained papers piled up like evidence of her long unemployment. Belinda had once been a pediatric nurse, used to the urgent beep of heart monitors, to children's endless sobs in the night. The children she had cared for often couldn't sleep because of fear, pain, or simply homesickness. She had learned to sit patiently for hours at their bedsides, spinning stories so silly even she laughed, just to see their tiny shoulders relax and their eyelids finally drift shut. Her own past was no gentler. She had lost her parents in an accident at age 7, growing up in orphanages, foster homes, never staying long enough to feel she belonged anywhere. She knew too well the feeling of being left in the dark, and she knew that what a child needed most was not sleeping pills, not threats, but a safe presence. That night, scrolling through job listings on a forum, Belinda's eyes stopped at unusual words. Must be patient. Must be ready to face the sleep disorder of 6-year-old triplets. Challenging job. 17 candidates already quit. High pay. She chuckled softly, not believing any family would be so blunt in a posting, but when she read further, skimming articles calling the children the sleepless heirs of millionaire Whitaker, her chest tightened. The story spoke of a late wife, a sudden accident, nights of helplessness. All of it reminded her of herself at 7 years old. This wasn't just a job, it was a cry for help. The interview took place in the grand room of the Whitaker estate. Mark appeared in a wrinkled suit, dark circles stark under his eyes. He looked at Belinda with the weariness of a man who had no expectations left after 17 failures. What surprised him was that she wasn't afraid, nor did she gawk at the mansion's wealth. Her eyes lingered on the family photo on the desk, Sarah, Mark, and the 3 children smiling brightly as if that was the only thing that mattered in the room. Belinda sat, fingers interlaced, her voice calm yet steady. "I don't have a miracle. I won't promise the children will sleep soundly after one night. But I promise, I won't walk out at midnight." Not the polished answer Mark was used to. No rehearsed claims of iron discipline or behavioral therapies. Just a simple promise from a woman who knew what it felt like to fear the dark. And in that moment, for the first time in months, Mark felt a small spark of light pierce his heavy night. Belinda started the job the next day. She entered the estate not like someone coming to fix broken children, but with a soft smile and a simple bag, a few old fairy tale books, a small flashlight, and a box of chocolate cookies she had baked herself. The housekeeper raised her brows, whispering, "This isn't like the others." Belinda only smiled. "That's exactly what I hope." From a distance, Mark watched, torn between worry and hope. Was this woman truly strong enough to step into the chaos of nights even he couldn't endure? Or would Belinda, too, one day leave behind only a short apology note like the 17 before her? And before we continue with the heart of the story, don't forget to hit subscribe and like this video. Oh, and be sure to leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to know. The clock struck 11, and as if on cue, the mansion shook once more. Ethan hurled his toy truck against the floor, the metallic clang slicing through the silence. Chloe buried her face into her pillow, her small shoulders trembling with sobs. Alex curled into himself in the corner, hands clutching his head, eyes wide as though trapped inside a nightmare with no escape. Mark rushed in, his heart pounding. He tried to stretch his arms around all 3, but was met only with frantic resistance. Under the glaring chandelier light, the children's panic seemed magnified. Helpless, he stood frozen, realizing again how this grand house had become a nighttime prison for his children. Belinda entered, but she didn't rush to break into the chaos. Instead, she stood still for a beat, as if listening to the frantic rhythm of the room's heartbeat. Then, without a word, she reached for the switch. Click. The bright light snapped off, and the room plunged into thick darkness. In that instant, both Mark and the children fell silent. A small beam flickered. Belinda had switched on a tiny flashlight, its thin ray like a silver thread. She swept it slowly across the ceiling, then onto the walls, scattering shimmering dots of light. Look, her voice soft and warm as a lullaby. The stars have been hiding in your room. Ethan froze, his tight grip on the toy truck loosening. Chloe stopped crying, peeking up at the dancing lights. Alex still shook, but curiosity flickered in his eyes. He crept from the corner, stretching out his hand as if to catch a star sliding across the wall. Belinda knelt low, guiding the beam into gentle curves. Each time the light moved, she gasped softly, as though discovering another secret. And for the first time in months, the room filled not with screams or pounding, but with broken giggles. Ethan laughed when the light hid under the bed. Chloe chuckled as Belinda pretended to miss a star. Alex smiled quietly small, but enough to bring tears to Mark's eyes at the doorway. The chaos melted. The three children huddled close around Belinda, following the light's path like tiny explorers. She whispered just loud enough for them to hear, "Some stars only appear when we dare to step into the dark, and if the three of you search together, you'll never fear the night again." Mark stood motionless, chest tight. For 6 long months, no one had quieted his children, even for minutes. Yet this woman, with nothing but a flashlight and a gentle voice, had done what 17 nannies could not. As the laughter faded, the triplets curled beside Belinda, their eyes slowly closing under their make-believe sky. No complex lullabies, no force, only the sense of someone present in the dark. And for the first time in months, Mark heard the sound he had ached for, the steady breathing of his children slipping into sleep. He leaned against the door frame, letting exhaustion spill into tears. Part of him wanted to rush in with gratitude, but another part feared breaking the fragile moment. In the dim light, Belinda looked up, the beam brushing her face, her warm smile glowing like a real star. Was this the beginning of a lasting miracle, or only a rare moment of peace before the next storm? A rare, quiet morning in the Whitaker estate was torn apart by the shrill ring of the phone and the blaring television from the living room. Mark froze halfway down the stairs. On the big screen, his children's faces filled the frame, red and swollen from crying, eyes wide with terror. The edited video looped again and again on a popular talk show, with a bold headline scrolling, "Helpless Millionaire and His Sleepless Demon Children." The frame shifted to a psychologist shaking his head. "This is severe behavioral disorder, uncontrollable. Children like these pose risks to themselves and to others." The judgment sliced through the living room like a blade, straight into the children's tender hearts. Chloe clutched her worn teddy bear tighter, eyes brimming. "Daddy," her voice quivered. "They said I'm crazy." Alex shrank against the sofa, body trembling, lips mouthing, "Am I too different?" Ethan clenched his jaw, fists whitening, before hurling his model car to the floor, the crash echoing like thunder. Mark's chest constricted. It felt as though hundreds of invisible eyes outside pinned him down. All his silent efforts, every drop of sweat, every sleepless night were now broadcast as a public joke. He longed to shield his children from the poison words, but his hands hung useless at his sides. Belinda didn't rush forward. She knelt to their level, her voice barely above a whisper, steady amid the storm. "No, you are not broken." Her gaze met each child's, firm as an anchor in rough seas. "You're just missing your mom, and missing your mom is never a crime." For a moment, silence. Tears stilled on lashes. Chloe blinked, her tiny hand loosening its grip on the bear. Alex lifted his head slightly, eyes searching for something gentler than the harsh verdicts. Ethan turned his face away, lips quivering as if suppressing a sob. Belinda rose, tugging the curtains wide, letting the last rays of afternoon sun flood the room. She disappeared briefly upstairs, then returned with a small bag. She dimmed the lights, switched on an old star projector, and taped sheets of foil across the walls. In minutes, the gloomy living room became a miniature universe, silver constellations shimmering across the ceiling. "Tonight," she said softly, "we'll prove to the world that even the dark can become a safe place." As night deepened, Belinda led the children into the transformed room. She spread blankets into a circle, sat among them, the projector spinning slowly. "Close your eyes," she whispered, "and dream. Dream your mom is here, smiling at you. Because when you dream, memories can turn into magic." For the first time in months, Chloe laid her head in someone's arms without screaming. Alex's lips curved into the faintest smile as his eyelids drooped. Ethan propped his chin on his hand, murmuring softly, "I want to dream." Mark stood at the doorway, chest tight. The same children the media had branded as demons now slept peacefully under a makeshift sky a woman had brought to life. And he knew tonight was more than rest. Tonight was the quietest, strongest act of defiance against the world outside. Would this fragile miracle survive the bigger storm still looming? My dear viewers, are you still here? Take a moment to breathe, maybe sip a glass of water, then stay with us for the rest of this story. Drop a 1 in the comments if this touched you, and don't forget to hit subscribe. The shrill ring of the phone shattered the fragile morning silence of the estate. Mark picked up, his palms slick with sweat. A firm voice on the other end cut through. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Child Protective Services. Following the wave of complaints from the news, we need to evaluate the situation, particularly at night." The words fell like a hammer. Mark froze, his eyes drifting toward the garden where his 3 children ran in circles. If CPS decided he was unfit, they could take them away. Millions in assets meant nothing compared to the risk of losing his family. Belinda stepped closer, calm as if she had foreseen this. "Don't hide," she whispered. "Let them see everything. Let them stay the night. Only the truth can protect this family." 3 days later, a gray sedan pulled up to the gate. A stern-looking woman stepped out, Mrs. Rodriguez, a CPS veteran of 20 years, accustomed to broken homes and abandoned children. Entering this gleaming mansion, she carried her doubts. Luxury often hid the deepest cracks. Night fell, and the cycle began. At 11 o'clock, pounding footsteps, pillows flying, cries splitting the air. Ethan darted around the bed. Chloe screamed for her mother. Alex curled into a corner's shadow. Mrs. Rodriguez sat stiff-backed, pen scratching notes, her gaze heavy. "This is exactly what the reports said," she thought. Then Belinda slipped in quietly. No panic, no scolding. She spread a quilt on the floor, nestled herself in the middle of the children, and whispered, "Tonight, we're going to explore the galaxy under this blanket." A small flashlight flicked on. The darkened room became a miniature sky. Ethan froze, wide-eyed, giggling when Belinda traced a long streak of light, a shooting star falling. Chloe whispered, "Mom will see me from there." Alex, who had known only trembling for months, left his corner at last, leaning against Belinda's shoulder, his eyes softening. The cries melted away, replaced by light, even breaths. Tiny hands reached for each other, curling close within Belinda's arms. A fragile moment, yet powerful enough to shatter every prejudice. The children once branded sleepless demons now lay quietly under an imagined sky, wrapped in safety. Mrs. Rodriguez lowered her pen, eyes brimming. In 20 years, she had rarely witnessed something so simple yet profound. "These aren't bad children," she murmured to herself. "They're children learning to trust again." Mark stood at the doorway, chest tightening. He hadn't seen his children sleep in peace since Sarah's death. He wanted to step in, to gather them all, but his legs felt nailed in place. Perhaps the moment didn't need his intrusion. The night passed in silence for the first time in months. The $1 million mansion echoed with no cries, only the hush of the garden wind and 3 steady rhythms of breath. At dawn, as the first light slipped past the curtains, Mrs. Rodriguez gathered her papers, her eyes no longer the same as when she arrived. Rigid doubt had given way to quiet awe. She knew what she had just witnessed would shape her report. But was one peaceful night enough to save this family from the weight of media scrutiny and the countless eyes still watching? The first sound of the morning was no longer crying but bird song, mingling with the rustle of leaves in the garden. Mark opened his eyes, half convinced he was still dreaming. The house that had once echoed with chaos now lay in an uncanny calm. He stepped into the hallway, stopping short at the sight of his children's bedroom door left ajar. Inside, 3 tiny bodies curled under blankets, their breathing steady, hair spilled across pillows like rays of sunlight. On the armchair near the bed, Belinda had dozed off, her hands still resting lightly on the blanket as though to soothe even in sleep. Morning light filtered through the curtains, bathing the scene in a sacred calm. Mark suddenly realized, for months, he had not seen this, his children sleeping soundly in someone's care. Since the night CPS had witnessed, the household began a new night ritual. No longer a nightly war between fear and exhaustion. Instead, the darkness became a stage for games of imagination, star hunting, planet counting, and sending stories to mom. Ethan no longer slammed doors or hurled toys. He now waited eagerly for lights out to search for where tonight's shooting star will be. Chloe, instead of screaming for her mother, softly sang lullabies to her doll, sometimes humming songs Belinda had taught her. Alex, once hidden in corners, now sat at his desk, sketching vivid pictures of a long-haired woman under the stars, the figure of his mother, preserved in his child's memory. Mark himself changed in ways he never expected. He began shutting down his computer earlier, setting aside his phone when the clock struck bedtime. At first awkward on the floor, he grew used to listening as Ethan narrated star hunts, tapping rhythms when Chloe sang, or chuckling at Alex's ink-smudged drawings. For the first time in months, he found himself smiling at the soft snores of his children. Through quiet patience, Belinda was no longer the hired nanny. She had become the invisible thread binding broken hearts, the keeper of light in nights once terrifying. Morning cookies, midnight stories, and a tiny flashlight had reshaped the heartbeat of the $1 million home. On some afternoons, Mark would catch Chloe tucking her doll onto the sofa, singing earnestly while Ethan laughed at Alex's attempt to draw a star with wide cartoon eyes. All 3 rushed to show Belinda, and she praised each as if every picture, every song was the most important creation in the world. Mark began rewriting his schedule. Evening meetings postponed, rushed lunches replaced with short trips to the park. He no longer felt guilty for working fewer hours because for the first time in months, he truly felt like a father, not just a weary shadow haunting a vast house. And in those quiet moments, he realized Belinda wasn't just healing the children, she was saving him too. Every time he glimpsed Sarah's eyes in Chloe or Ethan's stubborn smile, grief surged back. But Belinda stood like a bridge, turning memory from wound into tender remembrance. The Whitaker family was far from perfect, but they had found a new rhythm, a dawn unlike the gray mornings before. And in that light, Mark began to wonder, did he have the courage to keep Belinda here forever, not just as a caretaker, but as part of this family? Confetti burst across the hall, stage lights falling like a shower of stars. Mark stood in the wings, his heart racing not from the speech he was about to give, but from the sight of his 3 children stepping confidently onto the stage. A year ago, they had shrunk at the sound of a knock on the door. Now, before hundreds of people, they held their heads high. Headlines blazed, "Millionaire turns darkness into light." No one called them the sleepless demons anymore, but little warriors of faith. Mark had founded a support fund for motherless children, while Belinda launched a special program for kids with sleep disorders. Dozens of families came, bringing tears and left carrying hope. Ethan, The boy who once hurled toys every night now gripped the microphone with steady hands. His voice rang through the hall, "I'm not afraid of the night anymore." Applause erupted, but Chloe wouldn't let her brother stand alone. With a blue ribbon bouncing in her hair, she whispered into her mic, "I know Mom is still watching." The hall fell silent, then thundered with clapping. Alex, slower, held the microphone with both hands. His voice trembled, but each word pierced like an arrow. "I'm not broken. I just need love." The audience rose to their feet. Some wiped their eyes. Cameras swung to capture every tear, every stunned expression. Mark clenched his fists, afraid to blink for fear of missing this moment. When the spotlight caught Belinda in the front row, he saw the faint curve of her smile. Not showy, but a smile that said every effort had been worth it. Their eyes met. In hers, there was not just gratitude, but a quiet love that had been growing through countless sleepless nights. Their love hadn't struck like lightning. It had bloomed in the ordinary, a small flashlight turning a dark room into a universe, a lullaby that eased haunted walls, a steady hand on his shoulder quieting guilt. Piece by piece, those fragments became the family portrait Mark thought he'd lost forever. 2 years later, on a summer evening, the family sprawled across the lawn. The sky stretched wide, stars flickering by the thousands. Ethan pointed upward, insisting the streak of light was an airplane, not a shooting star. Chloe cradled her baby sister, whispering the story of Mom's star. Alex sat close to Belinda, drawing a circle in the air with a flashlight, grinning as his siblings squealed with delight. Mark lay back, arms wrapped around them all. His voice, deep and steady, carried across the night. "Darkness isn't scary anymore, because it has us." Belinda turned toward him, her eyes speaking more than words ever could. In the small cradle beside them, the newborn slept peacefully, her breath steady like the heartbeat of the family itself. They had survived the hell of endless nights, endured public judgment, braved the fear of being torn apart by CPS. Now, under a sky of stars, they were writing a new chapter together. Darkness, once their enemy, had become their shelter. It reminded them that healing doesn't always come from the world's dazzling lights, but from patient arms, from the steady breath of loved ones, from the belief that no one should ever be afraid alone. But if darkness had been tamed, what new trials might lie ahead? The story of the Whitaker family closed in laughter, beneath a sky full of stars, wrapped in arms overflowing with love. But did you notice? The darkness never truly disappeared. It only changed its face from fear into safety. And sometimes, darkness still holds secrets it has yet to reveal. Where might those secrets lead this family? Will their journey of healing be complete, or are new trials still waiting just beyond the horizon? The lesson we carry is simple yet powerful. No light shines brighter than love, and no sleep is warmer than when we know we are safe. Money can build a mansion, but only patience and compassion can turn it into a true home. Perhaps, as you watch this story, you also remember yourself those moments when you feared the dark as a child, or the nights you stayed awake to comfort someone you love. Don't forget, sometimes a single hug, a whispered word, or a hand resting gently on a shoulder can chase away even the deepest nightmares. And now, I invite you to pause and reflect. If you were Mark, what would you do when the darkness tests your family again? Do you believe Belinda will have the strength to stand firm beside him on the road ahead? If you're watching this video from anywhere in America, whether a small apartment in New York, a warm home in Texas, or a windswept shore in California, share this story with your family and friends. Leave a comment below, tell us what lesson you've drawn, and whether you'd like to join me for part 2 of this journey. Because, who knows? Perhaps, in the next darkness, another miracle is waiting to be found.